especially for gentlemen of us, that Lord, the standards are so high, the expectations are so high, and we fail most of the time. I pray that, Lord, let those around us be merciful unto us. Lord, we are seeking for your support and bless us. I commit our trainers, our facilitators, oh Lord, that tonight once again heal through them, again tonight once again bless through them, again tonight again speak through them, oh Lord, edify, inspire, because you are mighty God. We invite you forevermore. Be amplified, oh Lord, because we're only counting on you. This is our prayer in Jesus' holy name. Amen and amen and amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you. Thank you so much, Elder. At this time, I would like to invite Florence Maugo to take over the program and thereby invite our speakers for the evening. Karibu, Florence.
Thank you, Elder Pevi. Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone is having a lovely week. We welcome you all to yet another beautiful session on neurodivergence. Tonight we are having two speakers. We are having Boke Omwega, who is a passionate advocate for inclusion, education, and faith-based mental health support. She brings both personal experience and professional insight into the world of neurodivergence, especially within African and church communities where these conversations are often just beginning. So Boke has worked across education development, communication spaces, and is committed to making sure every person, child, teen, adult knows that they are wonderfully made. Her approach blends practical wisdom, grace, and deep compassion for those who feel different in a world that expects sameness. Please join me in welcoming Boke to as our speaker this evening. And we are lucky we have two speakers. We also have a psychologist in our midst. We have Lambert, who is a psychologist with 20 years experience in the field of mental health and works with children, adolescents, and adults. He believes in the power of the mind and its major influence on our thoughts, our feelings, behaviors, and attitude. He uses the CBT technique to help clients identify core beliefs that influence their lives negatively and assist them to develop positive adaptive coping strategies. He is a pioneer of the ADHD, that is the Attention Deficit Hyperactive Disorder Support Group in Kenya. And the group has helped educate hundreds of youths and families about ADHD and its symptoms, how they manifest, and how to manage them by focusing on strengths and not weaknesses. He is an executive member of the International Society of Substance Abuse Professionals of Kenya, that is ISSUP. I think I said abuse instead of use, apologies. And he's also a member of Kenya Counselors Psychologist Association, KCPA, and an affiliate member of Kenya Psychiatric Association, KPA. So welcome with me, our two speakers, Boke and Lambert. Karibuni Glory Land Church. Boke, maybe you can say hi as I share the screen.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for having me for this fellowship. We had a session at the last Family Life evening last week where we discussed neurodivergency and some of the common expressions of it, how to recognize it, and some basics on how to handle it. And today we want to cover some of the more practical aspects of parenting children who are neurodivergent, and also just exploring what it might look like for parents who are learning that they themselves have neurodivergent traits. So today's session really will look at not just the traits and everything there, but also about grace and the grace that we need for this journey. So welcome, and I hope this is helpful for everyone. We're going to start today's session with the Q&A that came out of, with questions that came out of last week's session. And these are all questions that were on your minds. So let's try and address some of them before we get into today's session. So, question 1, is neurodivergence real or is it just an excuse for bad behavior? Well, neurodivergence kind of reflects that some brains work differently than what we would call neurotypical. It's not for better or necessarily for worse, just different. What looks like poor behavior in your child or your loved one can be them reacting to a stimulus that you yourself may not feel. So no, it's not just an excuse for poor behavior. It's real. And what we're trying to establish in the sessions that we're holding is to understand that when someone is having a poor behavior, what you see as a poor behavior, this can be a symptom of a problem rather than the problem itself. And we're trying to see how to work and grow together to change that situation for everyone. Why didn't we see these issues in the past? This was raised as a question in the last session. It is not necessarily that the cases have increased, more that we are now increasingly aware, especially in this part of the world, that neurodivergence is an issue and it's not just laziness, stubbornness, or again, poor behavior, but an actual challenge that your loved ones are facing. We're here together because we are concerned about this issue and we want to know how to support one another. Can prayer or deliverance cure a neurodivergent child? While we need the support of the church family to, and our communities to raise neurodivergent children, let us not mistake that this is something that requires a cure. Neurodivergency is a developmental condition. That means that there is no known cure for it. It is something that we are learning to live with, learning to cope with, and learning to adapt to, so that the neurodivergent person and their family can understand their strengths and support them in their weaknesses. How do you tell the difference between a child being difficult and a child being neurodivergent? Again, when you see persistent challenges in the areas we're going to discuss, when you see persistent issues that are clearly not a result of poor intelligence or a willingness to misbehave, as a parent, we should, and as family members or friends to somebody who is neurodivergent, it's important to notice when someone is struggling and to understand that what is seen as difficult can often be just the expression of their issues, their problems. What is the difference between ADHD and autism? Think of ADHD as a brain racing ahead, racing down different tangents, different tracks, kind of like when you see lightning strikes. There's a single idea, but there's so many things branching out from that, and that split moment of that idea blooming. And so it can manifest as racing ahead, as losing focus, being scatterbrained. It affects mostly attention, impulsivity, and activity levels. Children with ADHD can interrupt often, struggle to sit still, or struggle to pay attention, and will often forget instructions, even when it's a common routine. Autism, on the other hand, would be a brain that sees the world in deep and sometimes very confusing detail, but may struggle with what we would consider social rules and norms. So it manifests as issues with social understanding, with communication, and with sensory processing. A child with autism may often avoid eye contact, may struggle with changes to their routine or to their clothes, to where they're going, and may be very sensitive to sounds, to textures, and light. Are there any tests or services available in Kenya? I believe this is now the wheelhouse of Lambert, but there are tests and services available in Kenya to confirm neurodivergence and to offer support. I believe some of them were mentioned in Lambert's introduction with the ADHD support group and the work that he does in general. So he will be addressing that in the Q&A session towards the end of the presentation. If he is in the meeting now, I would like to hand it over to him briefly to answer that last question about the tests and services available in Kenya. Thank you.
Lambert, karibu.
Asante sana. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Lambert, there was a question about the services and the tests available in Kenya to confirm neurodivergence. Could you give the congregation some insight into what's available?
Thank you for that question. Of course, yes. In Kenya, we have different clinics that do actually offer a screening, assessment, treatment through medication, behavioral programs, educational programs, and of course, referring to other specialists, including medical professionals, because you'll find that some people who are neurodivergent might also present with other medical issues. And as a result, then you will not only need the intervention of a mental health professional, but also the intervention of a medic. And of course, there are some conditions then during this process of assessment that will masquerade as neurodivergent. And a good example is hyperthyroidism. Some people who have hyperthyroidism or even hypothyroidism might present as if they have a neurodivergent issue, and yet that is not the case. And once you take them through a battery of investigations, medical investigations, then you're able to rule out some of those conditions that might masquerade as a neurodivergent. So maybe if I could run you through the process or I'll give an example. For example, condition like ADHD, which is now a common condition many people are aware of. The first step perhaps would be to first take a comprehensive history. And by this, I mean from the point that you meet someone, the first session, you do an assessment. You ask them questions about their personal lives from when they were children, and trying to really identify where there are patterns of neurodiversity from when they were young. Because as Nyaboke has put it very clearly, these are conditions that one is born with. So they start in childhood. They start having challenges in childhood, or perhaps they present with certain strengths that people might not really understand and might label or misconstrue this kind of behavior. An example is if a child is talented in comedy, then they might be the class clown, and sometimes they might go through a lot of suffering because when you're in class, you're expected to sit still and focus, and certainly at the end of the day, when you do exams, you pass. But you find a child is very funny, cracking up everyone, including some teachers, and then the child is punished. And yet that is a strength. And of course, you've seen many people who are in the arts, and nowadays you see people succeed. So you'll find that you look at that history, the pattern of the behavior patterns, and then, of course, you'll support this with some tests. And these tests would be tests like ADHD screening tests. They have a number of set of questions that will actually pick symptoms of what you'll call inattentive, hyperactive, or impulsive symptoms. So this is a battery of questions that you'll ask. And this is the parent or the adult can actually fill this out for themselves. And also we send questionnaires to schools. You send a questionnaire to the school where this child goes to, and the parent-teachers questionnaires will be filled by the teachers to corroborate the history of the symptoms that are presented at home. Remember, for you to diagnose, you need to make sure that these symptoms are not only presenting in one environment, they are presenting in more than one environment, and they are consistent and persistent and affecting their functioning. Also, we are advanced to a point where you can also subject some people, or I mean these individuals, to computerized tests. Of course, they're computerized tests. When these computerized tests are very helpful in terms of first identifying whether there are those patterns of the symptoms of this condition like ADHD, and then they also help in assessing the progress. For example, if a child comes and they are having problems in school, especially performance, and then they are put on treatment, then how will you know whether they are making progress? One of the ways you'd know is their performance will improve. Children might move from bottom of the class to the top of the class, and those are true stories. Or you might find that then this child might take longer to be able to improve academically, and through these tests, a repeat test can actually confirm that this person has improved from the time they were being assessed and the time they have started treatment and therapy, that there's some change, although slow, but there's some progress that's going on. And of course, then the story goes on and on, because now after that, then you're definitely looking into other interventions, which we can discuss another day. So there are tests that we do, and that I thought it would be best so that you have an idea of what to expect, because we are living in a world where sadly you might find someone might say, yes, I can be able to do an assessment, but what is it that you're looking for? You have to have an idea of what to expect when you go to any professional. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lambert. I'm going to share today's presentation in the interest of time. I have seen a question on the chat. Not a problem. We will address it towards the end, but I'll just read it for the sake of the presenters. So the question is that where do you put Jesus of Tongaren and his followers in this discussion? So one of you can take that, but for now, I think we can move quickly to the presentation. Karibu Boke.
Thank you. I'm actually able, this time around, we fixed the issue of sharing. So if you can allow me to share the presentation so I can switch through the
Not a problem.
transitions a bit faster.
Okay. There you go.
Okay, thank you. Let me, oh. Just a minute. Okay, can everyone see the presentation now?
Yes, the presentation is visible.
Okay, so today's presentation is looking at grace-filled parenting for neurodivergent kids. We're going to be covering, we're going to be talking about what makes neurodivergent people unique, emotionally, cognitively, and spiritually. We're going to walk through what happens when things break down, how to handle meltdowns, shutdowns, and executive dysfunction. And then we're going to explore discipline and discipleship. So now the nitty-gritties of parenting. And then I want to talk a bit about how to advocate for your neurodivergent loved one or child. And then finally to reflect, because this is a church-oriented session, we're going to reflect on what the scripture says and how we're encouraged by the scripture. Okay. So when you're trying to understand what neurodivergence is, there are just some core things I want us to keep in mind. Neurodivergent kids and adults live in a world that just isn't quite the same as yours. They're not broken, they're not wrong, they're just wired differently. Their world can often feel a lot more intense. It can feel like everything is louder than it would be for you, and things move faster than sometimes they can process. Feelings themselves can be overly intense in comparison to yours. They're experiencing the world through a different filter. Think of it that way. The brain and the body of a neurodivergent person will often process sound, touch, time, and even emotion differently. What seems to you like an overreaction can literally be something rough was on the skin and it felt like sandpaper, where to you it would just be mildly uncomfortable. What can look like laziness and refusal to obey instructions can actually be executive dysfunction, where someone knows what they need to do or has an idea of what needs to be done and simply can't move on it. This applies to children, teens even, and adults as well. So the journey of grace here begins with understanding that not all struggles may be clearly visible to you. I want to start us off by reviewing something from the previous session, just typical types of neurodivergence. So, autism can present as a child struggling with social cues, avoiding eye contact, as I previously mentioned, and being highly sensitive to changes in their environment or their routine. ADHD manifests as impulsivity, easy distraction, forgetfulness, and being very passionate about something, but maybe not able to follow through on tasks, even to do with the thing they're passionate about. Learning difficulties can include dyslexia, difficulty with reading, dyscalculia, difficulty with mathematics, or dyspraxia, difficulty with body movements and just general sports and action. Sensory processing difficulties manifest as what you would think of as extreme but sustained reactions to noises, sensations, and smells. Tourette's syndrome manifests as repetitive sounds or movements, and these increase under stress. I want to revisit a question that we'd asked earlier, how to tell the difference between a child being difficult, between someone being difficult and being neurodivergent. And it really isn't easy to identify as a layperson, especially because on the surface, both situations can look the same. Refusal to follow instruction, emotional outbursts, zoning out, but the key difference is in the triggers. With a neurodivergent child, the reaction is generally a consistent and patterned action, like reaction that you can link to specific triggers like noise or overly complex instructions. When your child does not respond well to punishment or pressure, but actually improves when adjustments are made, then consider that this is neurodivergency. As Lambert had pointed out, one of the best approaches to this is to observe and ask what the behavior is tied to, not to focus on the behavior itself, but to ask what makes this happen? Does this happen when they go to loud places? Does this happen around certain people? The pattern gives you the clues. And I also want us to consider that even if a child is simply being difficult, grace, structure, and addressing curiosity can go a lot further in changing that behavior than anger or shaming them. Either way, the child is generally asking for help, not necessarily punishment. C.S. Lewis, a famous Christian author, once said, "The task of the modern educator is not to cut down jungles, but to irrigate deserts." With this quote, we're being reminded that education, and really all guidance, is not about control. It's about nurture. It's about not cutting down who your child is, but to nurture them and to water what God has planted in your life. Now we're going to look at what happens when things break down. Okay. It's important to understand what's going on when your child or your loved one has a big reaction to something. The three main types of breakdowns that we'll be looking at are what we call meltdowns, shutdowns, and executive dysfunction. Understanding what's happening can help you see a way to have grace, to have patience, and to work through what is going on, not just to be immediately overwhelmed by, oh my God, why is this person acting like this at this time? This is so embarrassing. Because of what we're dealing with in terms of neurodivergency, I will be very blunt in this. Sometimes you have to put aside shame and embarrassment in yourself on behalf of your child or loved one. It's easy to want to approach discipline from the perspective that many of us were raised with, that there's a certain way you must act in public, and if you do not, that is a point of humiliation really for your entire family even. In this situation, the grace that is needed is to understand that this person is not doing it to upset or inconvenience you. They're going through a crisis, they're going through a struggle, and what they need is your love, support, and understanding. So let's cover what really happens when someone loses it in this situation. A meltdown is emotional or sensory overload. This manifests as loud crying, shouting, or flailing. It can look like a temper tantrum. But in many cases, what is happening is it's not a manipulation. Someone's internal system is completely overwhelmed. It could be over loud noises that are around them, such as sitting next to the speakers at church. It could be that there's too many people talking and they're trying to process every single thing that's happening around them, and it's confusing. It's too much. How do you handle this as their parent or friend? Stay calm. Try to move out of that environment or to remove the stimuli if you can. Offer space, water, something to drink, or something to comfort them with if they have like a toy or a pacifier or something. And most importantly, let them finish the reaction before you start talking and trying to understand what's happening. Because when you start going like, what's wrong, what's wrong, what's wrong, what's wrong, that is adding to the overwhelming stimulus. So in many cases, it's try and move them out of that space, try and move with them. In some cases, it's been as simple as throw a blanket over them, throw a shuka over the child, and let that dampen what is happening. I think part of the key is to offer comfort without pressure and to wait until they're calm to talk or guide on or even provide guidance on what has happened. This applies to both kids as well as adults. A shutdown is emotional withdrawal. Your child or loved one will go silent, stop responding. They may even hide in a different room and a different space or just completely freeze. This is very much a stress reaction. This can happen during family conflict, during exams, during a presentation or public speaking, or in the face of an unexpected change. Once more, the key is to give the person time and space to regulate this reaction. Don't force speech or explanations. Don't push about it. Allow for silence and try to gently reconnect once the person is starting to act a bit more normal, to reconnect gently once they're engaging with you again. Now, executive dysfunction happens to both children and to adults. This manifests as an inability to complete tasks or to even start them. Many times it includes forgetting steps in even what should be a routine task. What this is someone being overwhelmed by what needs to be done. I believe we've all heard a saying along the lines of every journey begins with a single step. Every mountain begins when you start climbing the hill. It's more literal than most when it comes to neurodivergence, because the ways to handle this include breaking down complex tasks into smaller steps. It includes visual aids or checklists. It includes just praising effort for providing timers and using step-by-step instructions. The key in this case is to have gentle prompts rather than constant nagging or complaints about someone being unable to do what should be routine, what should be normal. Praise effort and not just outcome. If someone completes 3 of the 5 steps, that is progress. If someone completes only 1 of the steps and still requires reminders to do the rest, that is still progress. This particular issue really hits home for me personally, because I have always had a lot of passion for different projects, even within basic household tasks. And then I would just lose energy, lose steam partway through. So I'd forget to do a very basic step, or I'd freeze in the middle of multiple tasks, such as when visitors come and I'm told do A, B, C, D. So set the table, start the water boiling, and get juice on the coffee table for the visitors who are coming in, and direct them to where they can wash their hands and take off their shoes. Too many tasks. So I'd try and do all of them and wind up doing none of them. Needless to say, that has caused a lot of problems. It wasn't that I didn't care or that I didn't want to complete a task. It was I didn't quite seem to know how to pace myself and to plan for some of the more complex tasks. What has helped me has been breaking down tasks into ridiculously small steps. It's not, for example, if I can use the example of schoolwork, it's not write the composition. Breaking it down means open the document, write that one sentence, write an outline, stand up and pick up water from the next room, come back and flesh out the outline into bullet points, and so on and so forth, until I can break down the entire task. One quick tip that has helped with providing the energy to continue in a task is to start your checklist of the day or of your tasks with something you may have already done. So if your to-do list for your child or for an adult was at the beginning of the day to say, okay, wake up, get dressed, get showered, make the bed, make breakfast, clean up. If I do my to-do list while I am having my breakfast, that's already several tasks in that list I've already completed. And seeing that I've already done something gives me the boost of energy, the boost of motivation to say, like, you know what, yes, I can actually do the rest. I've already done this much. It's not necessarily laziness. It's not necessarily willful forgetfulness. It's the need for reminders. It's the need for timers to remind myself that I need so much time to work with. Something that has helped greatly is using sticky notes at my desk or workspace to write out what needs to be done for different tasks, and then using music as a timer. So if, for example, I want to cook something in the kitchen, I will start a song or a playlist or an album, or sing a song that I know from choir practice, and say, for the duration of this song, that's how long I need to cut onions for. For the duration of 3 songs, that's how long the food needs to be covered before it's ready to serve. That kind of thing actually really helps. Try not to think of it as laziness. Think of it as a need for framework, as a need for scaffolding, so that you can get a task done. Before we proceed further, I want to ask if anyone is seeing themselves in these symptoms, if anyone is seeing something of what they've experienced in this. Because many of us may not realize that this is what we're struggling with. You just struggle with feelings of inadequacy and guilt when you're unable to fulfill your responsibilities. If you've always felt oversensitive to what people say around you or about you, if you've always been a bit too scatterbrained or just generally socially awkward, you may be wondering, okay, why is this not improving even when I practice, even when I've had all this time to learn these things? You may even excel in one area but burn out in others. And you may be trying to figure out why you're just generally tired of dealing with things. This can be burnout from constantly performing what you think of as normal. Sometimes you're suffering from sensory overload because you could never explain properly why you prefer to sit a certain distance from the pulpit, a certain distance from the door, or at a certain place in the office where the noise isn't too much. You couldn't explain why some clothes you just, as an adult now, when you have the power to choose what you're wearing, you're like, I'm never going to wear this again. It's horrendous. Like, I can't do, personally, I hate stockings. The texture just drives me crazy. I just can't stand the touch of it because the stimulus of the texture, it's not to the extreme of having a full meltdown over it, but it does distract significantly from any other task I'm trying to do while I'm wearing that. It's important to know that you're not alone. As the existence of Lambert's ADHD support group signifies, there are many people who are undergoing these problems. Many adults especially go undiagnosed, particularly in this part of the world, because there's a general lack of awareness about neurodivergence, which is what we're hoping to change with more meetings such as this. Stigma also plays a big role. The first step to changing or to addressing a problem is understanding that there is a problem. And if you're in denial about a problem existing, you can't find coping strategies or even the support you need to work through your issues. Understanding yourself is less about selfishness and more about grace, not just for yourself, not just for your child, but also for yourself. Once you understand that what the why and the how of what's happening to you and around you, it's a lot easier to have compassion on others and also on yourself, to forgive yourself for the things you are unable to do the way you think you should have, and to forgive your child perhaps for not doing things the way you think they should. It's important to know that you don't need to be labeled to start your healing process. It's discovering how you work and how you can adapt your environment to support yourself and now to support your child and your family or your loved one. When you're seeking support, honesty is important. Be clear about what's needed. Be clear about the kind of support that you need from your loved ones that you trust to know about your weaknesses, that you trust to know that you're having a problem. When people are asking, so how can I help you? It's important to have done some of your own research to know, okay, so how can my friends support me? Sometimes it's as simple as, could you say that you're coming to visit so that I have the energy to do the things I need to do and get my house in order? Could you give me a call this evening and see if I've done this task and just check in on me if I've been able to accomplish something? You can share some of what's going on in your mind. You can share some of your struggles and ask for the kind of help that will actually help you. Sometimes it's as simple as asking for patience, asking for grace, asking for help with a friend to give you a look or poke you if you're saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing at the wrong time. If you have problems with social cues, or have someone that you trust with you. If, for example, you have a partner, a loved one, a friend who is usually with you at such events, you can ask them to give you an agreed on signal when you're doing something wrong or when when the interaction is off. Invite curiosity by asking questions and sharing some of your perspectives. Romans 12 verse 2 says, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Well, part of the verse. This challenges us to remember that your mind can be renewed even after years of misunderstanding, years of not knowing what was going on, not quite understanding what was wrong. Healing is not weakness. Healing is strengthening and growth. So now let's move into some of the practical aspects of discipline and of discipleship. How can you teach your child? How can you learn together without crushing the spirit? I spoke earlier about scaffolding. Working together to develop structures that help are honestly the best way you can support a neurodivergent child or loved one in your life. This is not necessarily about discarding your own values or completely changing your life to suit another person. This is about working together, talking together, learning together about what will work to help both of you, to help all of you. Adding visual cues or reminders isn't actually helpful just for your neurodivergent child or family member. It can also help you. How many of us forget things when we go to the supermarket if you don't, because not all of us use shopping lists. But having something like that in place can also improve how you run your household in terms of knowing what is running low, what you still need. It can also help in keeping track of tasks that you yourself may forget just as a general matter of being busy and having other aspects in your life to deal with. When it comes to children, discipline with explanations, not just threats. Yes, establish boundaries. Yes, establish consequences for misbehavior, but also explain why this behavior is necessary. Sometimes when your kid is asking, so why do I need to do this? Why do I need to greet this person this way? Why do I need to be quiet in this situation? Explaining why can also help them frame it in their own mind and see how to adapt to that. When it comes to discipline, increasing stress will increase the symptoms that you're trying to prevent. As we've covered when we looked at the different types of neurodivergence, a lot of the symptoms increase with pressure, increase with undue stress. So when you're shouting at your child out of frustration, when you're arguing with your loved one about things that they didn't do the right way or in the right timing, or things that they have forgotten, that makes the problem worse. Again, patience, grace, this is needed, communication skills. Have the grace to pray for the grace to talk with one another calmly. Some things that you can do to adapt your spiritual teaching, such as during devotions and Bible studies at home, is to have shorter devotions. There are several offers online, especially on WhatsApp. Bible studies that have been broken down, the Sabbath school lessons that have been broken down. There are visual aids available online, especially like on YouTube, and it's also again shared on WhatsApp. Having breaks for movement or allowing for aids such as writing, having a notebook, having a drawing or something related to the study that you're doing, that can really help to learn the lesson and cement it in your child's mind. I believe many people have experienced the power of music with children and how much easier it is for them to memorize things and to understand some concepts through music. Whether your family member is 4 or 40, you can support the walk with faith through more practical tasks, through creative additions to your worship. Include music, include movement, include sharing. Have space for questioning and exploring what your faith means to each of you at an individual level. Something that I always said as when I was teaching Sabbath school is that God has to be personal to each of us. He can't just be the God of the family alone, or the God of my dad, the God of my mom. God has to be a personal presence in your life in a way that you can identify with, so that when you're on your own, you're not praying to a God that you do not know. It's important to be honest in your journey. One of the things that neurodivergent people tend to be very sensitive to is lies, especially the little white lies. Honesty and sincerity can reach a person, regardless of whether they're neurodivergent or neurotypical, in ways that I think we sometimes underestimate. Let your children, let your loved ones see you struggle. Share your struggle with them. Share what is working for you. Let them hear you when you're praying about what they're going through, what the family is going through. Let them know that this comes from a space of love, not just frustration. A symptom of ADHD that I learned about is called rejection sensitivity, where in several cases, someone is criticized and takes that as a personal attack, almost. So it's felt very deeply, perhaps more deeply than you feel that was warranted. It was supposed to be a throwaway comment. It was supposed to be a way to vent momentary frustration, and it becomes a wound. A saying that I've shared here is that faith is caught as much as it is taught. Your example is what leads, as a parent, as a loved one, as a friend even. If you're showing grace, as someone experiencing that grace, I also want to have it. I also want to learn it. One of the hardest lessons to learn as you walk in faith is when you may feel unqualified to lead. If you're struggling in your own faith in whatever way, you may feel unqualified, that you need to be perfect, that you need to be absolutely right. But God takes us as we are. In Isaiah 42 verse 3, it says, a bruised reed he will not break, and a smoldering wick he will not snuff out. God asks you to fan the flames even when you're struggling in your faith. He supports you. And there are few things as powerful as a testimony of people seeing you, your loved one, your child seeing you, learning and leaning on God. One of the hardest lessons I learned in my walk with my ADHD is knowing when to reach out for help. Reaching out to God, asking him to just be there with me, reaching out to friends when I was overwhelmed. Sometimes this can be also knowing when you're in too deep and knowing when to reach out for professional help, when whatever you've been doing that used to work no longer works, when it's seriously affecting your regular day-to-day activities and functions, then I sincerely advise you to reach out for professional help. In the Ministry of Healing, Ellen G. White says, the strongest argument in favor of the gospel is a loving and lovable Christian. What you show by example is the strongest recommendation that your child can have on how to conduct their own life and the values that you would want them to hold in life. I now want to move into advocacy and what it means to advocate for a neurodivergent person in your life. Advocacy is being the voice of someone who may not have a voice in the spaces where you are. As children, there are very few places where your voice is heard as an individual. And it is up to you as the parent, as the auntie or the uncle, as the caregiver, as a friend, to speak up for them where they may not be able to. And I want to walk through what that looks like. This may mean educating yourself on what rights and what accommodations can be made. It means building community by building awareness. And what this can look like is rehearsing situations with your child before events and preparing them for what they might face. Remember, you're the first teacher that your child has, you're the first coach that they will have, and you're the first and last line of defense of your child. You're the first line of defense for your loved one. Some practical things that you can do in school. Request a meeting early in the term. Discuss some of the more simple accommodations that can be made. Share what has worked for you at home. Adaptations can be made within the limitations of the environment. I had to learn how to advocate for myself at some point. One of the things I did in my schooling from primary school was to ask for permission to draw as I took my notes. I took very careful notes in class, but what really helped me excel in that situation was being given permission to draw small pictures that went along with whatever was being discussed or that came to mind as things were being discussed. I discovered that my grades went from okay to really good when I was able to adapt to that. And once the teachers saw that this was helping and not harming my grades, then it was something that they allowed, and this has persisted to my adult life. In church, you can talk with church leaders, or if you're not comfortable engaging with the church leadership, talk with your child's Sabbath school teachers or anyone who has a caregiving role in that environment. What are some alternatives of how your child can engage in that environment? If they're not able or comfortable really to present in public, would they learn, would they enjoy being involved in preparation, in helping other children set up for such a thing? Discuss what accommodations can be made, such as a quiet corner, being allowed to read or draw during the service, or even being allowed to leave the room or space where Sabbath school is happening and move up and down in the corridor nearby to get that activity out of the way. They can be engaged in the movements of like what children's choirs do in terms of movements along with the music. That can be very helpful in getting some of the energy out. A lot of times when you're addressing your community and asking for support there, advocacy looks like educating your relatives and friends, other caregivers in your community. If your child goes over to a certain neighbor very often or plays with their child, understanding what the triggers are and trying to avoid that. It can look like talking with your community and with your friends about the difference between discipline and support. How do you nurture your child? Share short resources of videos. WhatsApp is a fantastic tool for this. Most importantly, model the patience and grace you want to be displayed to your child and encourage others to do the same through that example. I want to be very clear on this. When you are advocating for these accommodations, when you're advocating for this understanding, you're not asking for a shortcut. You're asking for a structure that will help your child or your loved one thrive, that will help them actually perform within that environment. I want to close out the session by looking at some of the biblical reflections that we can have. What does God have to say to encourage us in this situation? Because it's not easy to have patience when you have a child that is not performing the way you expect. Proverbs 22 verse 6 says, "Train up a child in the way they should go, and when they're old, they will not depart from it." Every single child has a path that God has for them in store. The grace we're asking for to demonstrate is to allow them to find that path. Colossians 3 verse 21 says, "Fathers, do not embitter your children, or they will become discouraged." Don't crush your child's spirit through criticism and comparison. Nurture them. Mark 10 verse 14, "Let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of God belongs to such as these." Jesus welcomed all the children, not just some of them, not just the ones who looked regular, not just the ones who caught a lot of fish. He welcomed every single one of them. Isaiah 40 verse 11 says, "He tends his flock like a shepherd. He gathers the lambs in his arms and carries them close to his heart. He gently leads those that have young." God gives you the grace that you need for this situation. He gives you what you need. All you have to do is ask and trust in him. Your neurodivergent child has been entrusted to your keeping. Your neurodivergent friend or loved one is in your life for a reason. You do not have to be perfect to be there for them. You just have to be willing. Grace is not just for the children or for the person you're trying to support, it's also for you. It's to have compassion on yourself when you get frustrated and lash out. It's to have compassion and the willingness to ask for forgiveness yourself when you've wronged someone. It's the willingness to understand where you may have been harming your child through what you've been doing to this time, where you may have been hurting them inadvertently. It's the grace to forgive and learn, and the willingness to understand what you can do going forward. I want to emphasize that we are called to do this together. It's not something that you're asked to do alone. You're doing this together with your child. You're doing this together with your loved ones. Work through these things together. Celebrate the highs together. Grieve what you're unable to achieve together. Over and over, God has promised us that He will give us the grace we need for each day, the grace we need for each step. And I strongly believe that He fulfills those promises in our lives each day. There are many times that I wonder if I'm even qualified to speak in such a forum. I'm still struggling with my own issues. I'm still working through some of these problems that I've shared. But God does not wait for us to be tidy and perfect when He asks if He can speak through us. He just asks us to be willing to let Him. Some of my most honest prayers have been, God, I don't have it together today. Please help me. And guess what? He shows up. There is no shame in praying from the middle of a mess. There is no shame in asking for help, in reaching out for understanding. That is where grace comes in. That is where your discipleship becomes real. Thank you so much for allowing me to conduct this session. And I hope each of us has gotten a seed of clarity and of compassion in how you raise others and also in how you grow yourself. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Boke. We still have some few minutes. I'd like to give Lambert maybe some 10 minutes to say something. I saw some questions on the chat. Njeri Kuria wants to know the names of the tests. And then I don't know whether you or Boke will address the issue of Jesus of Tongaren and his followers. Are they neurodivergent or they just have mental illness? Karibuni.
Okay, to be very honest, I'll be doing a lot of injustice to this exemplary presentation that has been presented to you by Nyaboke. So I do not want to add anything because she has covered a lot on matters neurodiversity. And even more importantly, she has shared out her personal story. And I think as a professional, the least I can do is to give her a round of applause and congratulate her for taking time to do allow me to say, what she does best. Asante sana. And maybe at this point, I will attempt to answer the questions, and I will start with the last question. What are the name of the tests? Of course, as I'd mentioned earlier, I just focused on attention deficit hyperactive disorder. The truth of the matter is that there are other conditions, and really, when any person comes for an assessment, we have to be objective, because we cannot just assume that someone has a certain condition. It is through the stories that they present that will make us perhaps direct our minds and our ideas and our tools to a certain condition. But another important thing we need to appreciate is that assessment is not always straightforward, what we'd call a textbook diagnosis. And someone will come and automatically be like, nah, this is classic ADHD, this is classic autism, etc., etc. And that is why I mentioned a battery of tests. The golden standard in any assessment that which include any mental health professional, is the history taking. It's the story, like I put it. And one of the questionnaires that we'll use is a questionnaire that would involve what you call clerkship in a medical school, that is taking history, getting someone's biodata, the history of the presenting problem, when did this problem start, personal history, family history, if there is any history of mental illness. That is a standard, and etc. That's a standard tool that is used. Even drugs sometimes use of substance can make someone present with a condition that might seem like they are on the spectrum or are neurodiverse, but yet they're not. So that is number one. Now, after you've done that, then as a clinician, you should be able then say, I need to screen ADHD, I need to screen autism. And some of the questionnaires that will be used are what you call patient health questionnaire, behavioral assessment, behavioral assessments that focus on the neurodevelopmental stages, which would be, for example, parent-child self-report questionnaires or scales, and they are different. There's one that you might have for autism, there's one that you might have for ADHD. Then there's the Wechsler individual tests, which basically focuses on academic skills. Then there are a number of IQ tests that are available that, of course, people will need perhaps to buy. Beck's youth inventory, and etc. So there are different tests, and you need to be a clinician, because I know nowadays, because of popular psychology, I would actually go to the internet and simply ask AI or Google, and I'll get a number of tests, and I'll do and there are even tests that you can administer by yourself. And then now the challenge sometimes is that when you diagnose yourself, then it becomes an issue, because there could be false positives. Everyone will actually start saying I'm ADHD. Everyone starts saying I'm on the spectrum. And it becomes a little bit challenging. It is until you actually interact with a certified mental health professional or a general practitioner who specializes in mental health that you can actually then confidently say, for sure, I am on the spectrum otherwise. So I encourage us, as we take time to know more about these tests, and maybe go ahead and do our own personal tests on the internet. It is a plus because it gives you an idea, but that is not enough. This is a systematic process that would need the support of a professional or a conversation with a professional to help you know exactly what direction to take. And of course, the last question, which is a complex question, and why I'll say it's complex is because when you talk about individuals that we see on TV who declare perhaps that they've been appointed to do certain things by God, or they have certain powers, and of course you find many individuals like those have the gift of the gap, and they would actually easily and effortlessly convince people who are vulnerable themselves to start believing or following you. And as I'm a practitioner, I would probably say this is someone who's deluded. But you see, who am I to judge him? Because for me to reduce that someone is deluded as a clinician, I need to also meet the person, do a screening and assessment, like I've told you, to be able to eventually say that for sure I can confidently go anywhere, and based on this tests that I've done, this person is either deluded, or this person has a psychotic condition, or is on the spectrum, etc., etc. So I wouldn't want to say much, but I would urge as Christians to be very cautious about and aware about cults or cult leaders or people out there who might actually take advantage of your vulnerability. And even in our profession, this happens, and that's why we are regulated. I'm glad to say that recently there was a board that was put in place, and as mental health professionals now we are regulated by a board that is under the Ministry of Health, and we are licensed to practice in this country. And for me, that is a big step forward, because then if tomorrow you go and see a clinician, you can ask confidently, are you licensed to practice? And they should be able to produce their license number or practice number, and you can even confirm with the ministry that for sure this is someone who is certified to practice. And I do believe then this goes to even cover other professions, and even including this particular interesting person you've mentioned, Jesus of Tengaren. Is he regulated in any way? The people are going there. Do they know that this is someone who's regulated and they can actually confidently go there and be supported emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually? Asante sana, and I'd like to take it back to the conveners of the meeting. Thank you.
Please allow me to add something to that answer. I think it's very important that we identify the difference between neurodivergency and mental illness. We must be careful not to label every single unusual or extreme behavior as neurodivergence, because that adds to the stigma around it. Someone claiming to be a divine figure is, as Lambert has said, delusional belief, which could be an undiagnosed or untreated mental illness, but that is not the same as neurodivergence. And yes, at the heart of it, neurodivergence is not about attention-seeking behavior or about creating new religions. It is about needing different supports to live and thrive in this world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lambert and Boke. That was very informative. Hello? Okay, it was very informative, and we've come to the end of today's session. We will be meeting again next week for another session entitled Finding Your Rhythm, Thriving as a Neurodivergent Adult of Faith. So let's meet again next week, time and a day like this on Thursday for that session. Once again, thank you, Boke and Lambert. I'm going to now invite the Elder Pevi, to say the final prayer and to dismiss us from this meeting. Thank you so much. Na karibu, Elder.